Look around you right now. The chair you're sitting in, the building holding you up, the car outside, the fork you used this morning, all of it, every piece of the modern world you move through without thinking, exists because humans figured out how to turn a reddish-brown rock pulled out of the ground into one of the strongest materials ever made. That material is steel, and the story of how it gets made is far stranger than anything you have imagined. It starts underground. Beneath your feet, locked inside ancient rock formations, there are enormous deposits of iron ore. This is not the shiny silvery metal you picture. Iron ore looks like dark red dirt. It looks like rust, because that is exactly what it is. Iron that has already bonded with oxygen sitting inside stone, waiting. Around 1200 BCE, cultures across the ancient world began figuring out that if you got this reddish rock hot enough, something remarkable happened. The iron inside could be coaxed out, shaped, made into tools harder than anything made of bronze. The Iron Age had begun, and the world was never the same. But those ancient ironworkers could not yet make steel. What is the difference? It comes down to carbon. Pure iron is actually soft. It deforms under stress. Iron needs a precise amount of carbon added to become steel. Too little, and the metal stays soft. Too much, and it becomes brittle. The sweet spot is between 0.2 and 2.1% carbon by weight. Find that window, and you get a material that is both hard and flexible, strong enough to hold up a skyscraper, precise enough to become a surgical blade. Getting to that sweet spot is the entire story of steel. It begins with mining. Iron ore is blasted out of open-pit mines using explosives. The scale of these operations is almost impossible to picture. Some of the largest iron ore mines in Brazil, Australia, and China are so wide and so deep that entire cities could fit inside them. The ore gets crushed, loaded onto freight trains, and shipped to steel mills. At the mill, the ore gets mixed with coke, a carbon-rich fuel made from baked coal, and limestone. This mixture is heated until it fuses into clumps, pre-processing the raw ingredients before the real cooking begins. Now comes the blast furnace, and this is where things get extraordinary. Some blast furnaces stand over 100 meters tall. Inside, the ore, coke, and limestone get loaded in from the top. Superheated air, over 1,000 degrees Celsius, blasts in from the bottom. The coke burns. The temperature climbs to around 1,600 degrees, hot enough to melt iron. The carbon in the coke bonds with the oxygen in the ore, pulling oxygen away and releasing it as gas. What is left is liquid iron that pools at the bottom of the furnace like a glowing orange river. Every few hours, the furnace is tapped. Molten iron pours out, blazing, sputtering, into enormous ladle cars waiting below. But this is still not steel. The molten iron from the blast furnace contains too much carbon, typically 4 to 5%. It also carries impurities. To become steel, it needs refinement. The liquid iron gets transferred into a basic oxygen furnace along with recycled steel scrap. A water-cooled lance lowers in, and pure oxygen blasts through the molten metal at supersonic speeds. This burns off the excess carbon and oxidizes the impurities, which float to the surface as slag and get skimmed away. The whole process takes about 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes, raw iron from the ground becomes liquid steel. Researchers like John Percy, the 19th century metallurgist whose work on iron-making laid the foundations of modern steel-making theory, spent entire careers trying to understand exactly what was happening inside these furnaces. The control their work unlocked allowed steel to be made reliably at scale for the first time. But the steel is still liquid. It needs to be shaped. The molten steel gets cast into enormous slabs weighing over 40 tons. These get reheated and passed through rolling mills. Pairs of giant steel cylinders pressing together with immense force, squeezing the slab thinner and longer with each pass. It emerges as coils of sheet metal, structural beams, or rods depending on the final product. Not all steel is the same. By adding different elements in precise amounts, chromium, nickel, manganese, steelmakers change the final properties entirely. Add chromium and nickel and you get stainless steel. Add manganese and you get a steel that hardens under impact, used in mining equipment and rail tracks. Cyril Stanley Smith, the 20th century metallurgist, helped reveal the microscopic crystalline structure inside steel and why that structure determines everything about how the metal behaves. When you look at steel under a powerful microscope, you do not see a uniform solid. You see tiny crystalline grains packed against each other, each with its own orientation and boundaries. The way those grains form determines whether the steel is tough or brittle, ductile or rigid. Steel is not one thing. It is a precisely engineered microscopic architecture that you cannot see. After rolling and finishing, steel gets shipped to car manufacturers who stamp it into body panels, construction companies who weld it into frames, surgical instrument makers who draw it into blades thinner than you can imagine. By the time the steel reaches you, it has been transformed so many times through so many temperatures, forces, and chemical changes that you would never recognize its origin. But that is exactly where it came from. The chair you are sitting in, the building holding you up, the car outside, the fork you used this morning. All of it started as a reddish rock in the ground and became something only possible because, across thousands of years and thousands of furnaces, human beings refused to stop asking what happens if you make it just a little bit hotter.